Okay, so have you ever noticed how everything's got to be instant these days?
Oh, totally.
Like you order something online and you're refreshing the tracking page every 5 minutes. Or like fast food.
Right.
It's got to be ready. Like yesterday. Our whole culture's kind of obsessed with speed.
Instant gratification, right?
Yeah. But here's the thing. What about those things that, take time? Especially those big things, the ones that we often kind of put in the hands of, something bigger than ourselves, What happens when those things don't exactly line up with our need for speed?
That's a good question. And honestly, it's a struggle for a lot of us.
Oh, yeah.
It's that space, between what we hope for and when it actually happens. Sometimes it can feel like forever.
And that brings us to, a pretty well-known promise. It's from the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 31. And it says, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." It's a verse that honestly offers a lot of hope. But what does it really mean for us to wait upon the Lord? What does that actually look like in our lives?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're doing today. We're going deep, really deep into this verse. Like, we're not just skimming the surface here. We want to understand the heart of it.
Right.
So is waiting on the Lord just like sitting around being passive? Or is there more to it than that? Is it something we do, and how does this waiting, how does it actually lead to us feeling stronger, not just more stuck?
Exactly. We want to move past that surface level, right?
Yeah.
And to get there, we've been digging into this amazing Bible study lesson. It's focused completely on this verse, and it honestly provides a really great foundation for understanding what's going on here.
Totally agree. And, to truly get the weight of what Isaiah is saying in chapter 40, verse 31, it's so helpful to remember the background, the historical context. It wasn't just some random statement dropped out of nowhere.
Right. Okay. So let's paint a picture for our listeners. Our source points out that the book of Isaiah isn't just one big unified message. It's usually understood as having two main parts.
Yeah.
The first section, chapters 1 through 39, it's mostly about judgment and warnings, really, for the people of Israel because of their actions. It's pretty serious stuff.
It is. It's a call to really look at themselves, see where they've gone wrong, and turn back to God.
Right. And then you hit chapter 40. It's like, boom. Everything changes.
It does. It's like a shift in the whole tone of the book.
Yeah, it goes from all that heavy stuff to messages of comfort, restoration, and like a deep, deep sense of hope for the future.
Like a breath of fresh air,
Totally. And this shift is crucial because Isaiah 40 is speaking directly to the Israelites who were, at that time, exiled in Babylon.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Being taken from your home, everything familiar gone, your whole society in pieces.
Oh, it would have been devastating.
It must have felt so lost. So abandoned.
Absolutely. They were worn down, their spirits were crushed, and it's totally understandable that they would start to question everything, even God's promises.
So here they are, in the middle of all this chaos and uncertainty, and Isaiah comes in with this incredible message of hope.
He does.
What's the one big truth about God that he's trying to get across to them? What's the anchor they can hold on to? And what about us? What can we take away from this too?
He's reminding them and us of something essential about God. He's sovereign. He's in control. Always. He doesn't change. His power doesn't run out, even when we feel like our lives are falling apart.
That's a powerful thought, right?
It is. To know that even when everything around us is shifting and changing, God is solid. He's constant. That's something we can always hold on to.
It's so grounding. Okay, so let's zoom in on that key phrase in the verse. Wait upon the Lord. It sounds simple enough, but what's the deeper meaning behind those words, theologically speaking?
So this is where it gets really interesting. The original Hebrew word used here is quava.
Quava?
Yes, quava. And when we hear wait, we might think of sitting still, being patient, maybe even getting a little restless.
Right. Just kind of twiddling our thumbs.
Exactly. But quava actually means something a lot more active, a lot more hopeful. It means to look forward to something with anticipation, to really expect it to happen.
Oh, wow. So it's not about being passive at all. It's about actively having hope and expecting God to move.
Exactly. It's about trusting God, about fixing our eyes on him with this sense of confident expectation. And that leads right into the next part of the verse. Shall renew their strength.
Renew their strength. That sounds like more than just a pep talk or a positive thought.
Way more. Our source describes this as, and this is beautiful, a divine exchange.
A divine exchange.
Yeah. We come to God with our human weaknesses, our feelings of being drained, And in that act of waiting, with this hope, this trust, God pours his strength into us. It's like we trade our weakness for his power.
Wow. That is a powerful image.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get this incredible picture. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. What's the meaning behind that eagle analogy? What's it trying to show us?
Well, think about how eagles actually soar. They don't constantly flap their wings like fighting against gravity. They use the wind currents, and those currents just lift them higher and higher effortlessly. The image here is of God lifting us above our problems. He uses the very things that might feel like they're pushing us down, the winds of life, so to speak, and he uses them to lift us up, to give us a wider view.
So it's not about us struggling to get through things on our own strength, but it's about letting God's power lift us above it all, almost without us having to try so hard.
You got it. And the verse ends with, "They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." Those two actions, running and walking, they seem to point to different seasons in life, different demands on us.
So how would you interpret those two actions, the running and the walking, in this context of renewed strength?
I see it like this. Running without weariness could be those times when God gives us this burst of energy, this momentum, and we can make progress in some area of our lives really quickly. It's a season of intense activity, but we're energized by his strength. But like you said, life isn't always a sprint.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more like a marathon, and that's where walking without fainting comes in. It's about God giving us the strength to keep going, to be faithful day after day, even when we don't see big results right away. It reminds us that waiting isn't just sitting around doing nothing. It can be a time of intense action, and it can be a time of steady, persistent effort, and God empowers us for both.
That's so encouraging. It really covers all the bases, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we have a deeper understanding of what the verse is actually saying, the question that comes up is, why? Why is waiting on the Lord even necessary in the first place? Why doesn't God just, give us what we need when we want it, snap his fingers, and boom, it's done?
Such a good question, and it takes us to the whole issue of God's timing. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says he has made everything beautiful in its time. And our source makes a great point. God's delays aren't always because he's saying no.
Okay.
Sometimes they're actually, and this is a great phrase, they're divine setups. He's preparing us and preparing the situation for what's to come.
I love that. Divine setups.
Yeah.
It really does change the way you think about it. Instead of feeling like you're just stuck, it's like, okay, maybe there's something bigger going on here.
Exactly. Think about the story of Joseph, for example. He had those incredible dreams about being a leader, about his future. But then what happened? Years of slavery, imprisonment, 13 years. But if you look back, that whole time of waiting, it shaped him. It prepared him for the huge role he would eventually have in saving his family and, honestly, impacting entire nations.
Wow. That really shows how waiting wasn't wasted time for him. It was like a crucial part of his journey.
It was. And this also brings up the importance of faith. Our source talks about how waiting actually makes our faith stronger, makes our trust in God deeper. How do you think that works?
Well, when we're waiting, especially when we don't understand why we're waiting, it forces us to rely on God more. We can't figure it out on our own, so we have to lean on him.
Right. Proverbs 3:56 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." And, when things are uncertain, when we don't have all the answers, that's when our faith really gets worked out. We're forced to trust God more than we trust our own limited understanding.
It's like those times when you're lifting weights. You need resistance to build muscle. And our faith is kind of like that. And we see that with Abraham too, right? Waiting 25 years for the promised son, Isaac.
Yeah.
That's a long time to hold on to a promise.
Oh, it definitely is. It would test anyone's faith. And that long period of waiting, it refined Abraham's faith. It made it so strong. And we have to remember that sometimes God doesn't give us what we want right away because we're not ready yet.
Yeah.
Romans 5 talks about how going through hard times builds endurance, and that endurance builds character, and character leads to hope. So sometimes God withholds things, not because he doesn't want to give them to us, but because he's working on us.
That makes sense. We might think we're ready for something, but God sees the bigger picture.
Right. He knows what we need to become, like with David. He was anointed as king, but he had to wait years before he actually took the throne.
Yeah.
He had the promise, but there was a whole journey of preparation in between.
So those years he spent running from Saul, learning to lead, learning to care for others, they weren't wasted.
Not at all. They were shaping him, preparing him to be the king he was meant to be. So if we can accept that waiting is often part of God's plan, the next question is, How does God actually strengthen us during those times? What's going on behind the scenes?
Okay, yeah. We're in the waiting period, and it might feel like nothing's happening.
Yeah.
But what's really going on? How does that promise of renewed strength, how does it actually become real in our lives?
Let's go back to that eagle analogy.
Okay.
Our source points out that God often gives us a new perspective while we're waiting, a higher perspective. Just like that eagle, using the wind to rise above everything else, we're encouraged in Colossians 3:2 to set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. When we shift our focus away from our immediate frustrations, away from the feeling that things are taking too long, and we focus on God's bigger plan, on eternity, it changes things.
So it's about changing our mindset, seeing the wait through a different lens, a more like God-centered lens.
Yes. And then there's the promise of supernatural endurance, that running without weariness we talked about. When God calls us to something, even if it takes a long time, a difficult time, He gives us the strength to keep going.
He does.
Like in 2 Corinthians 12:9, where Paul is told, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And Paul's own ministry, wow, all the hardships he went through, it's proof that God gives us that supernatural strength to keep going.
He kept going, even when things were so difficult. And then there's walking without fainting, which I think is so relevant to our everyday lives, wouldn't you say?
It is. Walking is that day-to-day faithfulness, those small, steady steps of obedience, even when we don't see the results right away. Psalm 37:23-24 says, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord." Even in the ordinary parts of our lives, God is guiding us. He's holding us up, giving us the strength to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, to keep trusting Him. Like, think about the Israelites wandering in the wilderness for 40 years before reaching the promised land. That was a long time of needing to trust God every single day, of needing to keep moving forward, even when they couldn't see the end goal.
It wasn't a quick trip, that's for sure. And, all of this, it might be especially hard for people who are used to getting things quickly. I'm thinking of, younger generations, those who've grown up in a world of instant everything. How can they apply these ideas about waiting to their lives?
That's such a great point. In a world where we're used to instant results, waiting can feel, well, wrong. So if you're in a waiting season right now, maybe waiting for a job, a relationship, healing, anything really, our source offers a really helpful way to think about it. Instead of seeing this time as a punishment, like you did something wrong or like you're just stuck, try to see it as preparation.
A preparation.
Yes, God is preparing you for what's next. And when you start thinking of it that way, it opens up possibilities. You can use this time to grow closer to God, to serve others, to work on becoming a better person. It's not about just getting through it, it's about making the most of it.
So it's not passive, it's active, it's a time to grow. So what are some specific things our listeners can do while they're waiting to really connect with God and grow?
Well, our source gives us some really practical steps, and they're all based on Scripture. First, pray every day. Philippians 4:6-7 says to bring our worries and concerns to God in prayer, not let them eat us up inside. It's about talking to God, staying connected with Him, even when things are tough. Second, read the Bible regularly. Psalm 119.1-5 says that God's word is a light for our path. It helps us see more clearly. It gives us strength and guidance while we're waiting. Third, find ways to serve others. Galatians 6.9 says, don't get tired of doing good. Waiting doesn't mean we should just sit around and do nothing. It's a great time to focus on helping others, to make a difference in their lives. And finally, trust God's timing. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us that God's ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He sees things we don't see. He knows what's best for us, even if it doesn't make sense right now.
Those are great practical tips. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Isaiah 40.31, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to remember about waiting on the Lord?
I want them to remember that waiting is not wasted time. It's not pointless. It's a time of divine preparation.
Yes.
God is working in you during this time. He's strengthening you, deepening your faith, preparing you for the future. He has planned for you.
So instead of getting frustrated or discouraged, we can see this waiting period as a time of growth, a time of refining.
Exactly. And I love this quote from our source. The delay is not denial. It is God's process of preparing you for what's next. It's a powerful reminder that even when things don't happen the way we expect them to, or as fast as we want them to, it doesn't mean God has forgotten us or that He's not going to keep His promises. He's working behind the scenes.
That's so good. This deep dive has really helped me understand what it means to wait on the Lord in a whole new way. It's not passive, it's active. It's about trust, it's about hope. And God is right there with us the whole time, even when we can't see it. I hope you, the learner, have had some aha moments too. And hey, maybe this is just the start of your exploration of this topic. There's always more to discover.
Thank you for spending this time with me as we reflected on the beauty and the challenge of waiting on God. Remember, His timing is perfect, even when it doesn't match our plans. If you're in a season of waiting, hold on to His promises. He sees you, hears you, and works all things together for your good. If this message encouraged your heart today, I invite you to like this video, hit the like and subscribe button for this channel, and also share it with someone who may need this word of hope. Your support helps us continue spreading the gospel and reaching more people with the truth of God's love. Until next time, keep trusting, keep waiting, and keep walking by faith. God bless you.